When it comes to earning a living, most folks live inside one of three levels: survival, comfort, freedom. Now, that's not just about money. It's about how a person thinks. It's the philosophy behind the paycheck. You see, before a man can change his income, he's got to change his awareness. He's got to know where he stands. If you don't know where you can't chart where you're going. First step toward freedom is a raise or a new job. It's understanding your current philosophy. Survival is the lowest rung. It's when every dollar already has a name: rent, food, gas, bills you earn, you spend. And you start again Monday morning. I've been there. It's not that people at this level aren't working hard. They're working the hardest. But they're working only for today. When you trade all your energy just to stay, even there's no time left for tomorrow. Then comes comfort. This is a level where you can finally exhale. The bills are covered. Maybe there's a little left over, a nicer car vacation. You start to think this isn't so bad. And that's the danger. Comfort feels like success. But often it's just disguised stagnation. When a man stops reaching, life quietly starts shrinking. And then there's freedom. Freedom is when you no longer trade time for money. Your ideas, your systems, your investments start working while you rest. That's a new kind of peace. It's not about having millions. It's about choice, control, your time, your attention, your purpose. Every level demands a different mindset. Survival says, I have to. Comfort says, I can. Freedom says, I choose to. The shift begins the moment you get honest about which level you're in and what level you truly want. Because here's the truth: income follows growth. You don't earn freedom. You become the kind of person freedom belongs to. So tonight, take inventory, not of your bank account, but of your philosophy. What do you believe about work, about value, about growth? Because what you believe shapes what you earn, and what you earn shapes what you can give. That's where the journey begins, from awareness to action, from surviving to living free. Let's talk about the first level, the survival level. That's where most people begin, and sadly, it's where too many people stay. Survival income means that every dollar you earn already knows where it's going to. Bills are lined up like soldiers waiting for payday. You don't plan your money plans you. At this stage, life feels like a treadmill. You're moving, but you're not advancing. You're working harder, but you're not getting ahead. Every week you start over, and the finish line never gets closer. Have you ever noticed when you live in survival, all your energy goes into staying alive? You're not thinking about investments, growth, or contribution. You're thinking about keeping the lights on and food on the table. Now, there's no shame in starting there. Every successful person has passed through survival. It's a stage, not a sentence. But here's the key: it's dangerous to make it permanent. If you start believing that's just how life is, the habit of survival becomes a philosophy of limitation. People at this level often tell themselves, I just need a little more money. But the truth is, if you gave a survival earner twice the income without changing their habits or their philosophy, it would vanish just as fast. Because the problem isn't the paycheck, it's the pattern. The survival mindset says, if I can just work harder, I'll be safe. But the harder you work without new skills or new thinking, the deeper the rut gets. When I was young, I learned that the secret to escaping survival isn't luck, and it isn't effort, it's awareness. You must decide to stop working only for the day's wage and start working for tomorrow's growth. You must start trading hours for learning, not just dollars. That's when things begin to shift. See, survival keeps you focused on the urgent, the rent, the bills, the due date. But growth requires attention on the important, the ideas, the skills, the disciplines that build tomorrow's security. If you spend all your time managing crisis, you never build capacity. That's why survival living feels exhausting. It drains your energy, your creativity, and eventually your hope. Now, here's the turning point: the moment a person says, I'm done surviving, life begins to respond differently. Something in your spirit rises. When you decide you were meant for more than just paying bills and waiting for Friday, you start asking better questions. Not how can I get by, but how can I get better? And that question opens doors no paycheck ever could. So don't curse the survival stage. Use it. Let it teach you discipline. Let it teach you gratitude for small beginnings. But don't build a house there. Survival was never meant to be home. It was meant to be the classroom. And when the lesson is learned, it's time to graduate, because the next level comfort can look like a reward. But if you're not careful, it becomes another trap. And that's where many stop climbing. Now, let's move to the next stage, the comfort. Level comfort is a pleasant place. The bills are paid. There's a little margin, a little breathing room. You can go out to dinner, take a weekend trip, maybe even set something aside for later. It feels like success. And compared to survival, it certainly is. But here's the danger: comfort has a way of convincing you that progress is optional. Comfort whispers you've made it. And if you start listening too closely, you'll stop growing. You'll stop reaching. The hunger that pushed you out of survival begins to fade, and before long, you start protecting what you have instead of building what you could become. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the rewards of your work. In fact, you should. Comfort itself isn't the enemy. Stagnation is the problem, is when comfort becomes a goal instead of a milestone. Because once growth stops to climb, begins quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. I've seen it happen many times. Someone climbs out of debt, gets the nice job, the car, the house, they exhale, and they tell themselves, this is enough. But in life, nothing stays still. You're either building or decaying. You're either learning or forgetting. Comfort is a plateau that turns into a slope. If you linger too long, the comfort level people often trade adventure for assurance. They stop asking what's next and start saying that's good enough. And that's when their potential begins to shrink. The mind that once dreamed big starts settling for small wins. The person who once stretched now protects they're not surviving anymore. But they're not really living either. Here's a simple truth. Comfort costs more than survival ever did. Because it costs your ambition survival, takes your time, comfort takes your fire, gives you a softer pillow, but dulls your edge. It replaces hunger with habit, and habits built on comfort rarely lead to freedom. So how do you rise from comfort to freedom? You start by reawakening the hunger that got you here. You remember that the goal was never enough. The goal was growth. You start asking, how can I serve more people? How can I create more value? How can I multiply what's working? Those questions reignite movement. Comfort can either be your resting place or your launching pad. The difference is purpose. If you use comfort as a base to build from, it becomes fuel. If you treat it as a destination, it becomes a cage. Freedom demands that you keep stretching, keep learning, keep creating. So celebrate the blessings of comfort, but don't let it steal your vision, because there's one more level above it, and it's the level where life opens up completely. That's the level of freedom. And once you taste it, you'll never settle again. Now, let's talk about the third level, the freedom level. This is a place most people dream about, but few design for. Freedom income is when you no longer trade hours for dollars. Your skills, your systems, or your investments begin to do the heavy lifting. You still work, but it's a choice, not a necessity. That's a different kind of life. Freedom doesn't mean you stop working. It means you stop needing to work. It's when your money, your reputation, and your results start working while you sleep. That's when wealth takes on a new meaning, not just financial, but emotional and spiritual. You finally have the space to think, to give, to live with intention. I remember when I first learned this lesson, I thought freedom was about having enough money to do whatever I wanted, but real freedom isn't escape. It's control, control of your counter, control of your choices, control of your attention. You begin to design life around purpose instead of pressure. That's what separates the rich from the free. Plenty of people have money, but very few have time. The road to freedom begins with leverage. You find ways to multiply your efforts. Maybe you build a business that runs without you. Maybe you invest in assets that grow while you rest. Maybe you develop ideas that travel farther than you ever could. Freedom lives where multiplication begins. And here's what's powerful. Freedom is a mindset before it's a bank balance. Some people with modest means already think and live free because they own their time, their habits, and their values to others, and with all the riches in the world are still trapped in obligation. Freedom doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you've mastered. Now reaching freedom doesn't mean life gets easier. It means life gets bigger. You'll have new choices, new responsibilities, new levels of discipline. Because freedom can vanish as quickly as it arrives if you stop growing. The same habits that created it are the ones that sustain it. Freedom is not the finish line. It's a platform. It gives you the capacity to serve, to teach, to invest in others. The best reason to achieve freedom is so you can help others do the same. That's when wealth turns into legacy. So what does freedom really look like? It looks like waking up when you're done sleeping. It looks like doing work that matters, not work that pays. It looks like giving because you want to, not because you have to. It's the power to live life on purpose. And once you've experienced that, every other level feels small. Freedom doesn't come easy, but it's worth every ounce of effort, because once you master money, time, and discipline, you master yourself. And that's the highest form of wealth a person can achieve. Now, let's talk about the law that governs every rise in income, the law of value. The marketplace doesn't pay for need, it pays for value. That's the rule. It always has been, and it always will be. A person says, I need more money. The marketplace says, then become more valuable. It's as simple as that. Not easier, but simpler, because income rarely exceeds personal development. You don't get paid for time. You get paid for the value you bring to that time. Think about it. Two people can work the same 8 hours. One earns $10 an hour. The other earns 100. What's the difference? Same hours, different value. One has refined his skills, expanded his knowledge, and learned how to solve bigger problems. The other hasn't, and the marketplace is honest. It rewards solutions, not intentions. When I first learned this, it changed my life. I used to work hard and wonder why my paycheck didn't grow. Then I realized the secret was not in working harder, but in working smarter on me. If you want to increase your income, increase your value, The world will always pay for excellence. Now, here's the challenge. Most people try to change their situation without changing themselves. They want a better job without becoming better workers. They want more respect without adding more discipline. But the law of value doesn't bend. You cannot earn your growth to move from survival to comfort. You must learn basic disciplines, punctuality, reliability, consistency. But to move from comfort to freedom, you must grow in leadership, communication, creativity, and vision. Each level demands a different version of you. When you expand your capacity, the marketplace expands its reward. The law of value is not just about money, it's about contribution. You can measure a person's worth not by what they earn, but by what they give. When your work starts serving others in a meaningful way, your rewards begin to multiply. Because value is magnetic, it draws opportunity, resources, and people to it. Ask yourself, what skills am I developing right now that the marketplace needs? The answer is none. That explains a plateau. But the moment you begin to refine your gifts, to read, to study, to practice, the world begins to notice growth is never wasted. Every new skill becomes a seed, and eventually, those seeds turn into harvest. Here's the promise. If you work harder on yourself than you do on your job, you'll soon be doing better on your job. And eventually, you won't just be earning a living, you'll be designing one. That's the power of value. That's the foundation of freedom. Now, let's talk about one of the greatest secrets to reaching freedom, the principle of leverage. You reach freedom when your efforts start to multiply, when what you built begins to work without your constant presence, when ideas, systems, or people begin to extend the reach of your work far beyond your personal hours. You see, there's a limit to how hard you can work. There are only 24 hours in a day. Even if you worked all of them, you'd still be stuck inside the walls of your own capacity. But the moment you learn to use leverage, you break those walls down. Leverage lets you do more with less effort. It turns effort into multiplication. Let me tell you, something your hands can only reach so far, but your ideas can travel. The world that's leverage. A good idea written down can speak for you in rooms you'll never enter. A good system can keep producer results long after you've gone home. A good team can multiply your impact while you rest. That's the path to freedom. Most people never discover leverage because they never stop long enough to think about it. They stay busy, but they never build. They think effort equals reward, but the truth is effort only creates opportunity. Leverage turns opportunity into expansion. Without it, you'll always be working harder than your results. Leverage comes in many forms. People leverage people through leadership. They leverage capital through investment. They leverage systems through automation. But all of it begins with one shift, from doing to designing, from asking, how can I get this done, to how can this get done without me? That question changes your destiny. Now, here's the discipline. Building leverage takes time. It takes patience to teach, document, and organize. It's easier to do everything yourself in the short term, but that keeps you bound to survival thinking. If you spend your life doing what could have been delegated, you'll never have time to create what could have been scaled. Freedom requires that you move from being the worker to being the architect. You build structures that last. You build habits that repeat. You build relationships that grow. Every time you replace motion with multiplication, you're moving closer to freedom. And here's a key thought. Leverage isn't exploitation, it's empowerment. It's not about using people, it's about serving people so well that everyone wins. True leverage creates opportunity for others while expanding your own. That's the highest form of wealth. Success that reproduces success. So remember, this survival is limited by energy. Comfort is limited by imagination. Freedom is limited only by design. The more you learn to multiply your results, the more your time becomes your own. And once you master that, you'll never go back to trading hours for dollars again. Let's talk about the real turning point between these three levels, the shift in philosophy. Every income level is built on a belief system. Survival focuses on getting by. Comfort focuses on getting ahead. Freedom focuses on becoming better. And until that shift happens on the inside, nothing lasting changes on the outside. See, your income is a direct reflection of your philosophy, not your circumstances. The same economy that keeps one person poor makes another person rich. The same neighborhood that limits one man launches another. It's never about conditions. It's always about conclusions, what you conclude about work value. And growth determines your future. The survival philosophy says, I work to live. That's the mindset of necessity. You do what you must to stay afloat. Every decision is short-term. Every action is reactive. You're not planning. You're coping. It's not a moral failure. It's just a limitation. Perspective. You're focused on getting by. The comfort philosophy says, I work to maintain. It's the mindset's ability. You've escaped the struggle, but you stop stretching. You protect what you have. You think in terms of safety, not opportunity. You make decisions to preserve, not to expand. It feels calm, but it's quietly dangerous. Comfort breeds complacency. And then there's a freedom philosophy. It says, I work to grow is the mindset of progress. You're not chasing money anymore. You're chasing mastery. You're not surviving. You're designing. You wake up asking, how can I become more valuable today? That single question changes everything the freedom philosophy sees. Challenges differently when survival thinkers see problems. They complain when comfort thinkers see problems. They avoid them when freedom thinkers see problems. They solve them and get paid for doing it. That's why the same world produces different results for different people. The difference is an opportunity. It's outlook. Here's a secret. Wealth isn't first built in the bank. It's built in the mind. If you grow your thinking, your circumstances will catch up. If you shrink your thinking, your circumstances will catch down. The income always follows the mindset. So how do you make the shift? You start feeding your mind more than your doubts. You start associating with people who talk about vision. Instead of gossip, you read, listen, and study until your old philosophy begins to feel too small for the life you want. That's when growth begins, when your current thinking becomes uncomfortable. Freedom is not an external achievement. It's an internal evolution. You outgrow the limits that once defined you. You stop blaming and start building. You stop wishing and start working. You start to live by design, not by default. That's the moment you know the shift has happened, when your habits begin to match your vision. So remember this, the world doesn't get better, it gets clearer. Once your philosophy shifts, everything looks different. You'll start seeing possibilities. Where others see problems, you'll start seeing abundance. Where others see scarcity. And that's the surest sign you cross over from survival to comfort to freedom. Now, let's talk about the final part of the journey, the responsibility of freedom. Freedom isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of stewardship. Once you reach this level, the question changes. It's no longer, how can I get more? But what will I do with what I have? Freedom gives you choices, but choices demand wisdom. Most people think the goal is to make enough money to never have to think about it again. But that's not freedom. True freedom requires thought, planning, and discipline. The same principles that created it are the ones that preserve it. Learning, contribution, and gratitude. Without those, freedom turns into foolishness. You see, with every blessing comes a burden. When you gain time, you must decide how to spend it. When you gain money, you must decide how to manage it. When you gain influence, you must decide how to use it. Freedom exposes character. It reveals what kind of person you become along the way. A person who reaches freedom without wisdom soon loses both. You've seen it before. People who earn much, then waste it all. They mistook freedom for escape. And escape always ends in bondage. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want, it's doing what's right. Because you want it. That's maturity, that's stewardship. One of the greatest joys of freedom is contribution. When you no longer have to think about survival, you can start thinking about significance. You can help others rise. You can mentor, teach, give, invest. The best use of freedom is not luxury. It's legacy. You lift others as you climb. And don't forget, gratitude. Gratitude keeps freedom grounded. It reminds you of where you started and how far you've come. Gratitude turns success into peace. Without it, freedom becomes arrogance, and arrogance is the quickest path back to lost. Freedom is maintained by growth. Just because you've arrived doesn't mean you can stop learning. You can lose your edge faster than you earn it. Freedom requires new levels of discipline. Discipline to stay sharp, to stay humble, to stay useful. If you want to keep what you've built, you must continue to build yourself. And finally, freedom is about living intentionally. When you're no longer driven by need, you must be driven by purpose. Ask yourself each morning, what can I build today that outlives me? That question keeps a fire alive, because freedom without purpose soon feels empty. So remember, the journey doesn't end at wealth. It begins at wisdom. The highest use of freedom is not indulgence, but influence to live well, to give freely, and to inspire others to do the same. That's the full circle, from surviving to thriving to leading. That's the ultimate return on investment, the kind that multiplies not just income but impact.